was called to the bar in 1989, worked at the Attorney General's office as a state attorney. She then went to study for her LLM, Masters in Law at Georgetown University Law Center in the US. And based on, the knowledge she had gained as a state attorney, and as well as from the studies that she undertook, she set up what is called the ACT Foundation to provide multiplicity of services for people, for victims of violence against women, particularly domestic violence, including providing legal aid for them and shelter. She also got another master's and PhD, this time in theology as well, at the Kofi Chrysler Institute, which is affiliated with an institute, with a university in Germany. She's worked extensively on laws like the Criminal Offences Act of 1960, Act 29, the Domestic Violence Act of 2007, Act 732, and the Domestic Violence Regulations 2016, LI 2237. So at this stage, I'd like to invite Angela to come and give us a presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for staying. As for the mass exodus, it's not surprising at all. We live with it all the time. So don't worry. Thank you for staying. Yeah. Can I have the slides on, please? Okay, so I was given the topic to address as addressing violence against women. Even though most people think that this is a woman's issue, it actually is not a woman's issue. It's a national issue, and I think that as lawyers, we need to be very interested in it because actually citizens expect lawyers to be interested in these matters. So, let's go. What is violence against women? Next slide. Oh, I can do it myself. Right. Well, so we are taking the definition from the UN Article 1 of the UN Declaration on Violence Against Women. It says any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women, including threats of such acts, coercion or arbitrary deprivation of liberty, whether it occurs in public or in private. So this is not about somebody's domain. It is whether it occurs in public or private. Okay, next slide. So you heard the word gender-based violence right there in the definition of violence against women. And so we ask ourselves, and what is gender-based violence? Because it's very closely related. Gender-based violence is an umbrella term for any harmful act that is perpetrated against a person's will, and that is based on socially ascribed differences between men and women, males and females, boys and girls. So that is the basic difference here. And it is also violence that is directed at or which disproportionately affects members of one's sex. So whether we like it or not, this is the kind of violence or harm that actually affects disproportionately one sex or one gender, as some people use it. This type of violence has often gone unchallenged and unsanctioned. And it's something that lots of people don't like to hear about also. We have lived with it over the centuries in our homes, in our communities, and oftentimes it is normalized. So it's been unchallenged and unsanctioned. Women and girls are disproportionately affected by gender-based violence. Okay, thank you. Right. From left and right. Okay, thank you. So, women and girls are disproportionately affected by gender-based violence across the globe. And then domestic violence, which is what we have in our law, is an aspect of gender-based violence. And it occurs in the context of what the law calls a domestic relationship, which I'll be explaining very shortly. Okay. So now we are looking at domestic violence. It says this is an act of violence occurring within an intimate or family-based relationship. So that's the general definition of domestic violence. In Ghana, domestic violence has been contextualized by use of the term domestic relationship in our act, which encompasses anytime you hear the word domestic violence as in relation to domestic relationship, think about residence, think about romance, and think about relationship by blood. So that's the way in which we have stretched our domestic violence to cover all of these realms. We are very good at doing these laws. You know, we cross our T's and dot our I's when we are doing legislation. So I think our Domestic Violence Act is probably one of the best in the world, even though it's still going to be reviewed very soon. Hasn't been much used, but it's going to be reviewed. So, so when you think about residence, it just simply means that if you live with somebody in your residence, and even the person is not related to you by blood or by family, and you do something, you harm the person, that's domestic violence. Romantic could be anybody that you've had a romantic relationship with, husband, wife, somebody you've been married to before, somebody you've had a child with before, you know, all of those kinds of relationships. So, and then by blood, you know, mother to son, daughter to father, grandchild to grandfather, and all of that. Now, what we know is violence against women is very specific, okay? It's specific to women and girls. So that term just makes you understand that we are talking about women and girls because of what happens. But when you talk about gender-based violence, that's not gender specific. It can happen to anybody. And then domestic violence is also not gender specific. It can happen to anybody. But statistics the world over show that women and girls bear the brunt of violence against women, GBV and DV, and males are majority of perpetrators. Now, that is not to say that all men perpetrate violence, no, but that they are the majority of perpetrators by statistics, and females are majority of the victims. So let's just look at our domestic violence section. I'll be looking at some of the statistics a little later, and you see what I mean. In Ghana, we say that domestic violence means engaging in the following within the context of a previous or existing domestic relationship. One, it's an act under the Criminal Code, 1960, Act 29, which constitutes a threat or harm to a person under that act. So you see, there are many acts in our Criminal Code that constitute threats or harm. You know, assault, battery, assault with battery, and all of those things, female genital mutilation. There's a whole list of crimes under our Criminal Code, and all of it are incorporated into our Domestic Violence Act, except that if it's very grievous, then you can't prosecute under the Domestic Violence Act because it's a misdemeanor. You have to take it under the Criminal Offences Code, Offences Act. And then it also says specific acts, the acts to commit or acts likely to result in physical. Now, the Domestic Violence Act takes a whole range: physical, sexual, economic, verbal, emotional, psychological abuse. And then there's an omnibus clause. And that clause I like so much because I know the one who drafted this law and I know why they put it there. It means that if you can't be caught under physical, sexual, economic, verbal, emotional, or psychological abuse, you'll be caught there. Every kind of harm that affects the security, dignity, safety, integrity, health, and well-being of a person within a domestic relationship. So if you don't find yourself in any of the 5 or 4 I've mentioned above, you find yourself under the big omnibus clause. So I said it has a feminine face, and I'm sure some of you have seen many of these things. You are lawyers. If you haven't seen them, I'll be surprised. But I have. That's the life I live. I've seen people with their eyes coming out of their sockets, you know, all kinds of things. So this is just some of the pictures that we have. Of course, I just had to select a few. And there are some local stories I'd like to share. This came from interviews with police officers in the early 2000s. A judge said, the constable said, if I had to arrest everyone who beats, then jails would be full. And I'll be jailed too, because I beat my wife this morning. So this is a judge who was actually being interviewed, and the judge was repeating what the constable had told him just that morning. And then another interviewer said, this man was sleeping with the woman, upset that she had not emptied the chamber pot herself. The man beat the woman severely with a cane. stripped her naked, and threw her out of the house. The medical report was very bad. And then this is another police officer who says, a man was living with a woman. He was always beating her to the point where she lost all her teeth. She went to her parents time and time again. They always told her, that's your husband. Go back to him. You have children. And these are very common stories. Very, very common. So I just had to choose these little three. Now, violence against women, GBV, acts are committed generally because of the gender-based differences. I need to stress that. People often ask, what are the root causes? Is it jealousy? Is it misunderstanding? Is it what? I said, no. There are many jealous people who won't harm anybody. There are many people who are poor, but they won't beat up anybody. Okay? And by the way, statistics says that women in Ghana are among the majority of hardcore poor. So who should be beating whom? You know, so those reasons are all excuses. Alcohol, drug use. They can aggravate a situation. But the real root cause is the power differential between males and females, generally speaking. Okay? So if you find a woman also using violence, sometimes it's because the power has shifted and she sees herself in the dominant position. And sometimes that happens also because it's not only men who use violence. Now, this violence often happens because the victim failed to perform his or her society ascribed gender role. So for many times you hear people say, well, I beat her up, I slapped her about because my dinner was not ready. Why? Because he thinks yes, he is the guy, he's the head of the home, my dinner should be ready. So if you don't do the dinner well, then you can get a sanction for it. Okay? So yes, but you also, if you flip it, if you find some women causing a lot, particularly verbal and emotional violence, and if you ask them, they'll say, my husband is irritating me. He hasn't provided chop money for a long time. Why? Because we believe that men should provide the chop money. Okay, so that person insults the husband with very bad words because she thinks that he is the man, he must provide. And if he's unable to, then I can give it to him, an earful. So gender-based expectations bring about these kinds of violence. And then, as I said, now with societal recognition, advocacy, and legal reforms across the globe, there's a lot more challenge to these issues, and it's not as unsanctioned as it used to be. Women and men, girls and boys fall victim to DV, domestic violence and gender-based violence. Women, men, boys, and girls may all be perpetrators. We've established that. However, worldwide, over 90% of the perpetrators are male. But then, less men and boys may report these kinds of acts or crimes because of societal stigma and shaming. So there are many times when, I've worked with people like that, and even to be able to tell somebody that they are suffering that kind of violence is very difficult. The moment you say, you let your wife beat you, that's the wrong question. Okay? The person is so ashamed because they are a man, and, the only difference is that, again, because of the power differences in our society, economic differences, men have more options. Most of society will not tolerate a woman who physically abuses a man, but it's normalized when it's the other way around. So we need to understand some of those differences. And as I said, women and girls constitute over 90%. So we have different forms of violence against women, GBV, DV. I'm putting them together because they are related to one another. There's the physical type, the shoving, the beating, the slapping, the kicking, the murder, all of those kinds. Okay, and it's very endemic in our community. Sexual, we all know, the rape, defilement, incest. I run a shelter for battered women. I can't even now count the number of babies we have delivered who are the babies of the fathers of the women who bore them. Young girls, 14, 13, 12. And they carry their father's babies. And just a week ago, the court sentenced one of such fathers to 20 years in prison. Yeah, sometimes it's worth it, but it's still very, very sad. It's still very sad. Then we have the psychological, emotional, verbal kind, the kind of insults that make you feel so denigrated. You don't even think you can bath and feel clean again. Very, very, very bad. kinds of psychological and verbal abuse. If I leave you, who will marry you? Look at you. Things like that. Okay, or if you try to leave, I'll kill you and kill myself, I'll kill the children. And this is not a movie, it's Ghana. Harmful and then economic forms of abuse, where the person denies you from going to work or earning a salary or denies you property you both have access to. All of these things are present. And then we have the whole part that has to do with harmful traditional and customary practices. The FGMs, the trocosis, they are all still alive in Ghana. Cruel widowhood rights. Now witchcraft accusation is becoming a big thing. And I think that lawyers must put our weight behind the bill that is being drafted as a private member's bill in our country. It's becoming a big thing. I've seen some very harrowing videos in the last 3 days, and you can't believe this is 21st century Ghana. You just can't believe it. Okay. So let's look at some of the data. Globally, 38% of all murders of women are committed by intimate partners. 6% report having been sexually assaulted by someone other than a partner. Now, when I was in the Attorney General's department, I think my boss just thought that I like these kinds of cases. In fact, he saw my destiny very quickly. I like this, so he would ship these cases to me. And I mean, it was harrowing to see somebody, meets his wife, and most of the time in some of those parts, they are not even properly married. But they've lived for a very long time. They have children and everything. In one case, the lady says, you are misbehaving and I don't want to live with you anymore. Moves to her father's house. And the next day, she's going to the farm. The gentleman meets him and then it's with a machete. I mean, I was pregnant. I went to the back of the docket. I almost fainted. That's where the police will post the pictures. One arm here, one leg there, Another one, he just shot her right in front of their 12-year-old. Because again, she said, I can't take your behavior. Shot her just like that. And sometimes it would come. So intimate partner violence is wild in our country. And then about 27 to 30% of women, one out of almost every 3 women, aged between 50 and 49 years have been subjected to either physical or sexual intimate partner violence. On the average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. During 1 year, this equates to more than 10 million women and men every year. And then estimated worldwide that violence against women, is a greater cause of ill health globally than all traffic accidents, all cancer, and all malaria cases combined. Now, when you come to sub-Saharan Africa, you are looking at about 37% of women aged 15 to 49 suffering violence. In 2019, 1 in 5 women aged 20 to 24 years were married off before the age of 18 in many of our countries in sub-Saharan Africa, which is also a risk factor for domestic violence against children. I'm sure I don't have to go into that. Now, 200 million women and girls aged 15 to 49 years have undergone FGM, female genital cutting or mutilation or circumcision, as you would call it. And then ISA reports that in 2018, Ghana lost nearly 286 million US dollars in income for time missed from work due to this kind of violence. 286 million US dollars. This is a report, it's online. It has even more interesting statistics than this. Now, what are some of the constitutional and human rights implications of this kind of violence? It arbitrarily puts a victim's right to life at risk. It denies victims the right to liberty and security of their person and dignity. It abrogates their right to be free from torture and cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment. It deprives the victims of their right to dignity. It inhibits people from exercising their rights to enjoy their best state of physical and mental health. It also prevents people from realizing their right to equality under the law and in the family. And it denies people the right to effective remedies. Because if you see a victim, and that victim has to go through the system as we have it, before they started, their right to remedy is already almost quashed. And if they don't have any support, you can imagine how it goes. I liked your access to justice. I mean, this is real for us every day. And these rights are taken out of our constitution. We also have the Maputo Protocol on the Women's Rights Charter in Africa, and then the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Now, in Ghana, legislative frameworks for doing this kind of work comes from our Criminal Offences Act, 1960, Act 29. We now have our Domestic Violence Act, which was passed after 10 years of hard advocacy. I remember some of the things that were said to us those days by the parliamentarians. And then later on, when we started on the Spousal Property Rights Bill, they said, you people thought you had it easy with Domestic Violence Act. Wait until the Spousal Property Rights Bill comes here. So, there's a whole mindset about this kind of thing that we cannot run away from. It's also part of the power differentials, whether we like it or not. We can't run away from it. And you have a parliament that has 40 women and how many men? So when you hear some of these things, and I'm not saying all the women to understand these things. Yes, so you know where we are coming from. Then there are aspects of the Children's Act that also speak to domestic violence, violence against children, where you look at endangerment and harm and injury and all of that. Then now we have the Cyber Security Act 2020 that deals with sextortion, cyber stalking, and all of those things. It's a very, very good act. It captures a lot of the issues that have to do with violence against women and gender-based violence, but happening in cyberspace. And then the Human Trafficking Act also speaks to some of these issues. And then we have other regulations on all of these acts and provisions. For example, the Interstate Succession Law has a section on intermeddling and its criminal implications and all of that. So, all right. So what is to be done? After having worked in this area for almost 25 years, I believe in this approach. Now, this is the most unlegal of the presentations that you have heard this today. But I think it's important because of the nature of the issue. It is a multi-pronged, multi-dimensional issue. And therefore, that's the only way you can tackle it. So I call it the 4 P's and 1 approach. It's not anything strange. It comes from all the different instruments, legal instruments, international instruments, and practice that we've had over the years. If any one of these things is missing, you are not getting it. Prevention. Prevention is where we do mass public education across communities, and the state is employing all its resources to do that, if it can. Protection, provision, prosecution, and perpetrator accountability, and then coordination, putting it all together. If any one of these things is not there, you are not working at violence against women. And so Ghana has a real long way to go. We're a very nice country with many nice things, but when it comes to this issue, we are not nice at all. So what are some of the prevention examples? Where we confront structural roots with consistent activism. Now when I hear this word, I'm tired already. Because it takes consistency to put this kind of thing on the front burner. I mean, if you just look at the exodus, it shows you how the society exoduses when you think you are talking about these kinds of things. Okay? So without consistent advocacy, people don't see the need to do anything about it. It includes lawyers. You have to work with men and young people and other groups in strategic partnerships. And then there needs to be mass sensitization and awareness creation all through with all kinds of media. Now, most of these things are not being done. Not anymore. Protection examples, law reform. So, as for the laws, like I said, we are good. We have quite good laws from our constitution to our acts and so on. And we've done quite a bit of that. And then in the laws, protection and occupation orders, which might interest many of you, that can be used to protect victims and then take people out of their spaces, living spaces, instead of the victim running to a shelter and all of that. So those are supposed to be there. We need decentralized and community-based coordinated responses, institutional coordination at national level, and we have to build institutional capacity. And these are protection examples. Provision, we need crisis response centers. I think the only crisis response center I know in Ghana currently is the one I run. I don't know if there are others. Please, if you don't hear any other. Anybody? Well, I'm not sure. Yes, shelter, same. There are a few coming up. The state wanted to come up with 4 shelters, and it's never been able to take the step. So we're still pending. One private organization is trying to get a license for the last 2-3 years just to get a shelter going. I started running our shelter in 1999. It is still the only operational shelter in the country. Thank you for clapping for me. I don't even know whether it's something to be proud of or not. I mean, it's scandalizing. Since 1999, the only operational battered women shelter in Ghana. And it's not supported by the state, by the way. And the police who used to give us 24 hours protection now say we should pay them. So we can't pay them. Anyway, so we need medical, psychological, educational, skills training, legal aid. That's a big one. And other psychosocial support. And I must say, please, if you can clap for my classmate here, Sheila has been big on helping the people who come to us, representing them when they have to go to court and so on. I stopped when I resigned from Attorney General. So I never step foot again. If I go to court, it's because I'm going to watch a brief. So we need lawyers to represent them, and Sheila has been great at representing the clients that we bring to her in so many ways. In so many ways. She also pays school fees for people at the shelter. You know, make her way, then it means that, think about it too. Yeah. Resettlement, reintegration services. So, people come, like I said, it's a multi-dimensional issue. One case, she needs medical support, psychological support, educational, skills training. Something is going on here. Childcare issues. When they are leaving you have to resettle, you have to reintegrate. One case. Police, courts, hasn't come inside. One case. And then a lot of economic empowerment and, of course, follow-up services. These are not statistics, they are people. When it comes to prosecution, perpetrator accountability, we are thinking about police action, response, investigation, and prosecution. The courts, what the courts do, and the use of the effective orders as the protection and occupation orders. Brief watching, very, very important. Many things happen when these cases are going on. Many things. Brief watching, ensuring enforcement of sanctions, going after people when they are not, paying the maintenance orders that have been given by the courts or the protection orders. They are flouting it. You have to go after them. Perpetrator programs are not known in Ghana. That's also something that needs to come up by the prisons and the judiciary. And then we have to strengthen ADR systems because the Domestic Violence Act actually makes room for ADR. But we also know that if those ADR systems are not watched, people are often pressured to drop the cases or pressured to go to ADR when somebody has to be watching out for them. So we need to sensitize these systems against victim bias. And of course, we can't do without our traditional sanctioning systems too. That is why I put trained. There are some community-based leaders, traditional leaders who have sought training to be able to help victims at the community level. And that's also work that needs to be done. And yeah. So coordination is monitoring legislative cohesion and implementation, monitoring policy action, evaluating and feeding back. Resources availability is a big thing for every institution that is concerned with this. And then the most important is the role of the Ministry of Gender. And it's our weakest link. Because that is the policy practice institution for these issues. It's our weakest link. So what has Ghana done so far? We've established the Special Police Unit, which is the Domestic Violence and Victim Support Unit, DOVSU, as you have heard. Now, most of you know that DOVSU also came about because quite a number of us, again, shouted and shouted and shouted. And then DOVSU came. That was 98. And then the Domestic Violence Act was passed in 2007. And other legal provisions have existed, as I said. We adopted also a national policy and plan of action. Oh, all those papers are very nice. And then we have established 18 gender-based violence courts so far. I mean, that's good for the judiciary. Yes, very, 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 very good. And counting, they've been held by some of our donor agencies. There are many guidelines and and the SOPs, all for the police, for the courts, all of these things are there. We've also established a Domestic Violence Management Board, a DV Secretariat, and a DV Victims Fund. Now, all these things I'm mentioning nicely are there in name. There in name. Okay? Who has ever heard about the DV Victims Fund? It's been launched about 5 years ago. Nobody knows even which bank that particular fund is sitting in for you to go and donate into it. And then we also have a few women's organizations, in particular in CSOs, that are still doing the advocacy. You know, Lawa, Aula, FIDA, the ARC, WILDAF, one or two more about that. And then providing services, doing research, educating, disseminating IENC materials. Anytime these laws came out, most of the time it was these CSOs that would actually take them to the courts and to the police. Otherwise, they will never get it. So that's a lot of work that we've been doing. So what are our challenges? This is a multidimensional issue that requires multidimensional response, but there is inadequate political will. As for this one, it applies to every situation in our country, I think. Inadequate political will to enforce or fully implement an erratic political and policy leadership. What happened to our gender minister? Yes, but that ministry is there to make sure everybody else is doing their work. So if it's not working, how does anything work? I don't get it. I really don't get it. It appears that governments think that it's like a ghetto. It runs about 13 departments with the least budget, and nothing goes on there, practically speaking. It's very heavily donor dependent. There are many institutional weaknesses. Legal requirements in regulations are largely ignored. Services are few and far between. All of these services I mentioned are urban-based. The rural-based systems are very small, again, run by CSOs. Access to justice for many is still very heavily problematic. I don't have to go into cultural reinforcement and resistance still exist. There are people who still think this girl is crazy. Why is she doing this work? Okay, and when I ask them for help, they say, if they can't get help for themselves, let them go. You know, they just don't get why you should waste your time doing this. Inadequate pro bono lawyers, and then inadequate pro bono doctors, because there's supposed to be free medical services for victims. The doctors are not willing. It's a policy issue, and we don't know what to do. The indigent status of most victims increase their vulnerability, and the vulnerability cycle just continues. And then when it comes to legal processes, and that's where some of you may be interested, because you may be going for protection orders and occupation orders, we are realizing that there are many bottlenecks emerging in the legal processes. While the Domestic Violence Act says we should do it this way, the judiciary has also set its own rules for making sure that you can apply for these protection orders, and how it must be served on the person, and the kinds of challenges that are coming up from the defendants, the respondents. It's something that is coming up big time, and I'm hopeful that lawyers would take a look at it. But why should we care as lawyers? Because fortunately or unfortunately, by thunder, by fire, lawyers have been the ones who have been on the forefront of these issues. No two ways about that. Most of the work that has been done in this area has been done by lawyers, mainly women lawyers, and a few nice men lawyers. But yes, mainly women lawyers. I think people just expect that women lawyers. So often I get that. So these days when I hear I say you know, it can be very, people expect that you would work in this area and you work real good. So lawyers have been in the forefront of this issue, but not enough lawyers. It's as much a legal issue as it is a social justice issue. So I know that lawyers are about making a lot of money. This morning we heard about African trade issues and so on. But that money you make is not all for your chopping. It's just you make some and you come and put some in these social justice issues, you know, as your CSR, as somebody who loves God. I believe we all love God. So, and it is a developmental human rights and a gender issue when it comes to relations between men and women. It affects our constitutional rights and freedoms at a very personal level. It leads to breakdown of families and increases crime. Now, sometimes people think this is a low-class issue. No. One of the baddest cases I had was that of a lawyer who would beat his wife and tear her clothes and push her out of the house. Neighbors would find her, and this wife too was a professional. Yes, she was a professional. Neighbors would find her, put clothes on her back, and then ship her to us. And for some reason, she thought that he would change. Oh, upon some no money the move. Yeah. I mean, we felt that one day they would just come and tell her that she's dead because it was that bad. So, yes. Yeah. Judges too. Yes. Fictional real cases. Yes. Fictional real cases. Yes. It's not a low class issue at all. And in fact, when the victims are also middle class women like us, it's very hard for them to disclose. So they suffer more than the community level women who seem to be more resilient in advancing their own than middle class women. That has been my experience for the last. They are suffering in silence. And there are new dimensions requiring legal and legislative work and advocacy, such as witchcraft accusation as a serious form of violence. Pandemics make VAW, GBV, DV even more dangerous. Swift and effective policy responses are needed. The number of girls who got pregnant during the COVID pandemic, I'm sure you heard it. Now, all those girls were under 14, under 15. So technically, this was not somebody having sex. They are all defilement cases. Yes. The lockdown period. Yes, 500,000. Yes. Lockdown period, it was that bad in Ghana. These are technically defilement cases. This is not people having sex with people. But what happened? VAW, GBV, DV knows no professional, ethnic, or locational boundaries. Lawyers are involved as victims and perpetrators. It could knock at your door or next door. So how do you intervene if you want to help? Sometimes people ask, I want to help, I don't know what to do. Well, as lawyers, if somebody comes before you, put on your lawyer's cap. That's what I used to do when I started this work. The person is talking and I'm already thinking which criminal provision can be applied to this case. But I realized very quickly that when it comes to this kind of clients, sometimes that's not what they are looking for at all. They need something before the law kicks in. And sometimes you need to be sensitive to these things. You ask to be alone. If you see a victim or a survivor, please put them in a place where they are not among a lot of people. Otherwise, disclosing is very, very difficult. Sometimes they will come wearing big goggles. And if you ask them what happened to them, they'll say, I walked into the door. And know where the wound is and where the door is. Doesn't match. Exactly. And then also believe them when they are speaking. We are trained to inquire. But usually, if there wasn't a matter, they won't come to you. Believe them. No matter how bizarre the story seems, believe them. I had a case of a woman whose husband was not only physically abusing her, but had sexually assaulted all the 5 children. Yes, up to the 18-month-old baby. Yep. No more them cry. No. All of them. So when they were admitted to a shelter, you can imagine the amount of money that was spent on medicals. It was really serious. All 5 of them. We finally got him arrested because he had been arrested once and he was let go. And then we finally got him to be arrested again. And then finally they got him for indecent exposure and gave him 5 years. And when he was in prison, he actually sent somebody to tell his wife that when he comes out, he's coming after her. Yes. Yeah. And that's why some come. Because if they don't find shelter, something will happen to them. So, believe them. Because victims really lie about the violence. They rarely, I'm not saying they don't, but rarely believe the story. If anything, they minimize it. So, please be patient. Keep asking. And then call in resources. You may be a lawyer, all right. But like I said, that person needs more than your legal thinking. Be aware of agencies that can assist the victim. For example, a women's crisis center, shelter, counselors, psychologists. We don't even have sexual assault referral centers. The police. So you need to do a multi-purpose kind of work with these kinds of victims. It's not just your lawyer's cap. And then, of course, document. This is very important because this kind of documentation may be used in court to support a victim's case. Documentation is very, very important. I think in one of our very recent cases that Sheila handled for us, the children happened to be recording their father as he was screaming at their mother, the things he said. And of course, the judge got to listen. Made a difference in ordering for a protection order. Okay, so ensure safety. The safety of the victim and any children involved is paramount. So if they should come to you because you're a lawyer, you're in the community, you're in the church, you know, that kind of, they will approach you, oh, lawyer, and after listening carefully, you know, and you see that this is not a matter for them going back home. Don't say, oh, please, you just go home, come to my office on Monday. No, you have a duty to help them find safety. And thankfully now, if you don't know about us, at least the DOPSU, the national headquarters, they've opened a center also. It has a small temporary place. It can hold for up to 3 days, 4 days, maybe transferred to us. We have the longer term kind of shelter. Yeah. Don't just let them go. Now, some of these referral resources or centers, I've talked about DOPSU, they are all over the country. Yes, they have lots of capacity issues, but they're still what we have. We have to use them. We have to challenge them to do well, which is what we try to do. FIDA office in Accra. FIDA used to be in Tamale and Kumasi, but now funding has whittled down the work. Wildaf used to be in Takrady and Ho. Now they are only in Accra. And then paralegals that have been trained are also in some of our communities. Shraj takes up some of these cases. There is the Widows and Orphans movement in the northern regions for those who may be up there. And then, of course, I count all of you lawyers as part of these teams who help people. Gender Center has combat teams in rural communities, a number of rural communities. We have proposed that the government should sort of adopt that and replicate, but it hasn't happened yet. We run, the Art Foundation runs a crisis center, a transit shelter, and a shelter. And then the hospitals also help. Of course, Department of Social Welfare, if you can get them to move. It's also another matter. But they are there. Any police station, if you can't find a DOPSU. Legal Aid Commission is very helpful, depending on who is actually carrying your case. But of course, they also, yes, Legal Aid Commission for you. Yeah. Very, very helpful too. Very helpful too. If you can find them. And then, use some of our sensitized traditional community and religious leaders. So this is where I say thank you very much. God bless you. I hope we've learned something.
I'm sure you will agree with me that Angela has given us a lot to ponder on. Please, let's give her another round. So we still have some few minutes to take in some questions for clarifications, comments, etc. But she's told us a lot about the problem of violence against women, the fact that it's a constitutional issue because people's constitutional rights stand to be violated. It's also a legal issue, etc., etc. Yes.
Thank you very much. I remember that any time that I'm on an interview panel on radio and it's about gender, they are quick to call Auntie Angela. If it's about those issues, you call her. One of the things that I've also realized is that I would make an input on it is the rules of procedure in terms of our court. If our laws are not victim-centered, so if you really even want, especially I use the example of maintenance. The man does not want to pay the maintenance. The court has made the order for maintenance. You decide to apply for it. You want to go for contempt, to cite the man for contempt of court. It falls within the general province. He has refused to pay the fees. School has reopened. You can't do anything about it. And the judge, adjournment is done. The judge will tell you, you ought to have said a penal notice and those kind of things. So it goes back to the whole procedure again. No, the courts will be there, but the procedure are not victim-centered. In the Juvenile Justice Act, it tells you that the whole trial must take place within 6 months. But if the victim happens to also be a juvenile, the law is silent on the time period for which it has to be done. So I think that we all have to, one way or the other, in terms of the procedural rules, we have to make sure that we change it when there are victims involved, so that it be victim-centered. And lastly, I think when you come for some occasions, we should try and do collection, donation. And I will start by saying that I pledge 1,000 cedis. And I urge members here that we start a fundraising right now, because at the end of the day, by our practice, we may not see each other till the following year, and we all come and say, oh, ah. Meanwhile, we can help. So if you don't have the time, we should donate.
Angela has said, show the donation thing. They have a donation app account. So maybe just, if you can show it. Do you have it? Yeah. Yeah. Who needs soft copy of that one? Thank you very much. Hello. Thank you very much, Dennis. But what you said about the fact that the rules are not victim-centered, it doesn't really take care of the victim very well. You know, currently in the gender-based violence court, which is in the district court, according to the Department of Social Welfare, if, let's say, a child has been defiled and it's in the court, we ask them, aren't they supposed to come and help that child? They say no. The law doesn't say they should come in. We had somebody from the UK where we met some judges, and they indicated that once a child has been defiled or whatever, social services steps in immediately, rescues the child from the environment. Because if the child is a victim of, let's say, incest, the person goes back home. And then what happens? The police will not get evidence, and school fees will not be paid, etc., etc. So a lot needs to be done, okay? Yeah, so the procedure, etc., etc. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Domestic Violence Regulations of 2016, LI 2237. It's been there since 2016. Most judges don't know anything about it. In a recent application, you know, it became a big contentious thing because there are all these forms at the back of it where the judges are supposed to use. They don't even have copies. Okay? And then if you get an order for, in a particular case, order for protection order, the woman needed police assistance to go and get her items and her children's items from the house. They said that if you don't, there's this funny rule, if you don't specifically ask for police assistance to, like, I don't call it escorts, whatever. So you have to go, had to apply again, then go to the Chief Justice's office to get some letter, which will then take you to director for legal at the police station, at the police head office, who will then send it to the district where it is, and then the money you need to get that police thing for a simple person. I think we should also thank Angela, because in a particular case, a woman who has been battered can't stay in her house with her 3 children, was at her shelter for a while. I'm helping with it. I thought that she then reported to the police, but the man is a very senior, he calls himself a supo. Supo is, they say, superintendent in some, maybe, as I'm learning from my sister here, you shouldn't be mentioning which institution it is. So he's a supo, etc., etc. When the police went to just help the woman to get her things out, it took 6 policemen, 2 with guns, and there he was. Don't they know that he's a supo? And what are they doing there, etc., etc. I mean, the whole thing is so upsetting, and sometimes you really wonder, okay? Yeah, and sometimes the arguments are brothers and sisters make in court. Somebody actually, in their submissions, are saying that the Domestic Violence Act, when you want to apply for protection order, you have to come ex parte first, and later on notice. They say that the ex parte application is against the rules of natural justice. But if the law says you can, is it against the rules of natural justice? So some of the things that we say, I know, the law seems to be amended, but sometimes it's difficult, and it makes it very difficult. So we're really grateful. There's law reform pending, so maybe ideas and views to how to strengthen it will be very welcome. Yes. We still have a few minutes, and I know that the National Secretary is looking at his time. It's not 5:30 yet, so we will listen. The donation, please.
Oh. It's a very easy number. Yes, so
we need a basket.
Yeah.
Can we get a basket? Or a bowl? Hello. Yes.
My name is Jamata Ishaq Pelpo.
Once we are doing the collection, can we give opportunity for questions?
Mine is not a question, but to behave like Oliver, I want to ask for more. once my brother has set the tone, I think it's right for us to
To
pick it
support.
up from there.
Yes.
I came across a group called Rwandan Men Resource Center at one of the training programs. And basically, their position is that this fight shouldn't be left for women by themselves. That men should work at changing certain behaviors that they've grown up with. And for them, it should start from the boy child, so that by the time the person is married, we wouldn't be having this
Okay.
kind of conversation
Thank
we're
you very
having.
much.
So I want us to challenge our men. Who wants to champion that for us?
Yeah.
Form a group that targets the boy child from the onset. Thank you very much.
So Angela, take some of those. But the little question I want to throw back at you is that who brings up the boy child? Who is? I would say who is the primary caregiver when that boy child is being brought up?
It's the mother.
So the socialization is on all of us, both men and women. If we don't re-socialize, we will still continue having this. Angela, you want to make a point?
I'm done, but I just wanted to give you the number in case you want to. It's a very easy number. Yes, 0243 0243 777773. 0243 777773. Yes. Okay.
0243.
Yes, the sevens are 5. Okay. Yes. 7773.
Account number.
Account. Oh, okay. I'll have to find it and
Should I borrow your bush?
yes. So
Hello. Yeah. I think that the Ark Foundation, Rex. Yeah. I think that we would. I have a copy, a soft copy of her, the brochure she sends out seeking for funds. Maybe we can put it on the portal somewhere, so that people can look at it and donate and contribute. Yes. Gloria. Oh, sorry. The young lady has the mic. Let's finish, then we'll come to Gloria. Please finish it, then Gloria gets it. Not working. Angela. Yes, please go ahead. We will ensure that we are hoping that the GBA will give us a CLE to go into the legal things. And we'll bring not only women lawyers, but male lawyers are also helping. They actually help at her legal aid center. It's a male lawyer who is doing a lot of the prosecution, and she sends some to some of us in our small firms. So thank you so much. We will find time to go through some of the processes, a little, the laws. Gender basis of violence against women. Thank you for the lesson. Mm. Yes, Gloria. Gloria. Hello. She looks older. Number. Okay. Another clap for Angela for looking out for vulnerable people and actually helping them. Hey, listen. That is, she's disgracing the family. Yeah, Angela supported a girl who had been made pregnant by her father. I mean, to go to, give her school. The girl has now gone to teacher training and completed. She was at her shelter. She stayed at her shelter to finish schooling, and she's now a teacher. So at least he helped somebody's life to become better. Okay.
It's men or older men who are known in the family, fathers, stepfathers, best friends, who trust
People knew said.
I remember when I was teaching
Someone want to help, but